Greetings and welcome to Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist. I am Susan Alexander, and I am the Pastoral Associate for today's service. Welcome to those of you who are here in person, and also to those of you joining us via Zoom. For those of you joining us remotely today, please turn on your video for a moment. We'd love to see you and greet you. Please note that you can turn on your chat to interact with each other and your Zoom host during the service. For those of you here in person, please take a moment to turn around in your seat and wave to those joining us on Zoom. Thank you. Welcome to whomever you are, wherever you are, to Mountain Vista UU. I'd like to take a moment to offer a special note of gratitude to our audiovisual team, Chris Tackett, our music director, our minister, Reverend Matthew Von Crary, our greeters, hospitality folks, our religious exploration team, and to many others whose hard work facilitated us being in this beautiful space today. Today is Easter, which to someone like me who didn't grow up in a Christian home doesn't mean a whole lot. The whole Jesus returning to life never resonated as more than a fable to me. but I still have an Easter story. My Easter story is also a story of rebirth. My Easter story begins in 1988 in Duluth, Minnesota. We moved to Duluth in late November of that year. By November, winter in northern Minnesota had already been underway for a couple of months. Temperatures were cold, the days were short and dark, and the skies were gray. There was already a few feet of snow on the ground. I didn't see many people out and about as I made my way downtown to my office. This seemed a little odd for a town of 85,000 people. Then I discovered that the downtown buildings were connected by a series of tunnels and skywalks. The skywalk system in downtown Duluth is actually 3.5 miles long. The hospitals and clinics and the university buildings are connected by skywalks and tunnels too. No wonder I didn't see anyone. I remember my first spring in Duluth. Temperatures were soaring into the 40s. The sun made more frequent appearances, and suddenly I saw people and activity everywhere. People came out of the skywalks and tunnels to walk outdoors. Trees, which had been barren and dormant for 7 months, suddenly were festooned with large buds, waiting to burst open. The buds were obscenely distended, swollen, voluptuous. It was almost erotic. And suddenly, I got it. I understood rebirth. I understood why Easter and the myth of Christ returning to life was observed in spring. Was I not witnessing the great rebirth of the earth right before my very eyes? Of course. In my remaining 30 years living in Duluth, Minnesota, spring was my favorite season because I would have a profound reawakening experience. My spirit was renewed every spring by seeing life around me where there had been so much darkness and little sign of life for so many months. And now I'm living in Tucson. There's a renewal of life, a rebirth here too, and it's not subtle. Tucson rebirths in flowers. In the past few weeks, I have noted poppies, desert primrose, penstemon, lupin, wisteria, desert marigold, gopher plant, heliotrope, scorpion weed, fairy duster, white chicory, aloe, and everywhere the brittle-bush flowers. My neighbor's orange tree has flowered, making me almost swoon over the scent. Their yellow ladybank's rose is breathtaking as it drapes over a wall. Down the block is a silver torch cactus flowering red. Also, the bougainvillea and lantana are blooming. Other cacti, such as the claret cup, prickly pear, and the hedgehog, are wowing me with the intensity of their colors. The Mexican yellowbird of paradise has flowered, and the oleander is starting up. I see yucca displaying their blooms, as well as creosote and mesquite. The desert globe mallow is flowering in pale pink, hot pink, coral, lavender, and orange. The night blooming apple cactus is displaying its huge white flowers. There is much here beyond what I have named, and much I have yet to learn to identify. So that's my Easter story of rebirth. There's no need for the myth of a humanoid deity rising from the dead, because as far as I'm concerned, the reality of our natural world provides the best rebirth story of all. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, everyone. Our chalice lighting this morning comes from the Reverend Paul Beadle and is entitled Add the Alleluias. Let us contemplate the Spirit together. Spirit of life and love, justice and peace, day in and day out, weight weary tasks, burdens that we lift again, worn paths we wear some more, want and means worn thin, fatigue, pain and grief, coldness of heart, bitter and weary days where we know desolation. And so, how is it that when we come to Easter, we come with hope? When our hearts are burdened, sunken down, how do we dig out and rise up? What healing touch do we long for? What balm might we take? Come what may, O Spirit of life, may we keep a ray of light for our inward path, a living water in the depths of us, a cleansing breath here at our core. May we keep for them all of that for ourselves and to share. May we call forth from each other vitality and tenacity. May we love. May we find justice. And may we have the touch to call others back to life and love, justice and peace. And may we sing songs and always add the alleluias. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, may we find true harmony. Amen. Our opening song is Lo, the Earth Awakes Again, number 61. And today Julie will be our song leader. Thank you so much. Please rise in body or in spirit and join your voices together. The words will be projected.
From the winter's
As Unitarian Universalists, we come to Easter once again with two minds. We are a people who find within the story of Jesus' resurrection a truth about love and justice. And we are those who do not, and yet find value in sharing in a tradition that reflects the renewal of the world through the seasons, the ending of winter and the coming of spring. And as it turns out, it's really not that unusual to find this split on Easter mornings. In an open-ended survey by the Barna Group in 2010, it found that most Americans continue to view the Easter holiday as a religious celebration, but many are not clear as to what the underlying reason is for the occasion. All right, then. So today we are allowed then to hold both an Easter celebrating the resurrection of Jesus and an Easter celebrating the renewal of the seasons. We are allowed to hold both as a paradox of how we live within them. Because we seem to live right between these inconsistencies. The death of a man over 2,000 years ago who we talk about and celebrate today. And the dark quiet of winter, turning to the dynamic growth of spring. In a world of desolation and pain and mourning, where we dare to still sing Alleluia. And more than any single answer, we hold the paradox and find clarity by engaging it with our lives. For example, over 100 years ago in Jamaica on Easter Sunday, E. Ethelred Brown sat in a boys' choir in the Montego Bay Episcopal Church and was not very happy. It was a special Easter litany that he heard. The priest recited and the congregation repeated, "In the unity, Trinity, in the Trinity, unity, and this we must worship." He later recalled, "The strangeness of the Trinitarian arithmetic struck me so forcibly that I decided then and there to sever my connection with the church." Although I doubt he got up and left the choir. Probably waited till afterwards. That afternoon at his uncle's house, he found a booklet on the table entitled, "The Lord Our God is One God," by the Reverend William Ellery Channing, a Unitarian minister at that time. He borrowed the book. After reading it and some others, he decided he was a Unitarian. In the following years, he overcame considerable roadblocks: immigration to the United States, racism within his chosen faith. But then in 1912, Ethelred became an ordained Unitarian minister. He then founded the first Unitarian churches in Jamaica, and then in Harlem, the Harlem Community Church in New York. He crafted a lifelong ministry woven into the Harlem Renaissance and into the liberation of Black individuals in the Pan-African movement that spanned the globe. In 1947, he stated that he was a Unitarian because I could not be enchained by the creeds and traditions of the Orthodox churches. I wished freedom. I wished freedom. At the time of his death in 1956, he was recognized as one of the three founders of Jamaican independence, a leader in the humanist liberal tradition, and the first Black minister of our faith. "Religion is not an opiate," he once wrote, "but a stimulant, an incentive to noble deeds and the sustaining power in the hour of crisis." And his gift to us today on Easter Sunday is a legacy, a reminder that as Unitarian Universalists, we navigate paradoxes of life all the time, but we do it with a freedom to think and to act and then to share, so that others, all others, may be free as well. May it be so today, Easter Sunday, and in all of our days to come. Yesterday, our nominating committee sent an email broadcasting it to our congregation, members, friends, and guests, sharing our slate of officers to be elected at our next congregational meeting who will be serving our congregation. First off, I'm extraordinarily grateful to Pi Irwin, Ann Tatum, and Mary Nell Hoover, our current nominating committee, for their diligence, their vision to seek out our future leaders. Thank you. And then I'm grateful to the 7 women who have agreed to serve our congregation in the coming years. If you're present here this morning, would you please stand and remain standing as I read your names and office that you will hold. Aaron Eichelberger, Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist President. Karen White, Vice President. Sally Wistrand, continuing as our treasurer. Jessica Collins, joining our board as a member at large. Connie Casebolt, joining our endowment committee. And Summer Addy, nominations committee. Please hold on for a second. The Reverend Ethelred Brown said of our faith, we are dedicated to the progressive transformation and enrichment of individual and social life through religion, in accordance with advancing knowledge and a growing vision for humankind. Now, before you are elected, we get a little bit to know you as future leaders in the coming weeks, to hear your knowledge, understand what your vision is. And during that time, you come to know us through your new role as leaders, the members and friends and guests and staff of Mountain Vista, to discover how our faith supports each of us, how our community enriches and transforms not only our lives, but the lives of those in our broader community. Thank you. Thank you for your service to us now and as future leaders.
Alleluia, alleluia.
I invite you now to a time of meditation, of centering wherever you are and breathing as your body allows. Breathing in and out a little longer. Hear these words, the Psalm of a Wintered Soul by the Reverend Cynthia Fredo, who passed in 2021. Wisdom is with us still. To the weaver of molecules, the spinner of stars, the impulse that gives birth to the universe, to the earth, to me. In the deepest dark of night of my wintered soul, I wrap myself in the blanket of my sadness and grief, pain and suffering, doubts and concerns, fears and questions, and look out from my wondering eyes toward the light that dares to penetrate the layers around me. So obscured is my vision because of trials and tribulations of this life, that your fractal rays of possibility and hope that I seek to inspire me, to emerge me from this cocoon waits. Each luminescent ray of hope and love and possibility is the catalyst which I need to transform my thoughts and emotions into the fuel for that inner fire, which will dispel the darkness of my night, which will help me to see more clearly the embers of love and hope and possibility that dwell within me. And I long to be fulfilled and be renewed in energy and strength to thrust new life into these wings of my rebirth. The fragile fragments of my life, ingredients from the alchemist's hands, creating a new energetic substance to course through me. This womb of my becoming has been one of struggle and transformation. I was never meant to remain in the confinement of darkness. I was created to dwell in the infinite light. And so to that weaver of molecules, that spinner of stars, the impulse that gives birth to the universe, to the earth, to me. In the deepest, darkest night of my wintered soul, I shall look through the window of my expectant eyes toward the source of my being, waiting as I do for your alchemist's hand to create within me the change that is necessary for a season of my rebirth. I was never meant to remain in the confinement of darkness. I was created to dwell in the light. Spring will come again, this I know. And I will be ready for my emergence and unfolding, that I might soar ever higher into my own becoming, into the light of my own transcendence, awakened, renewed, reborn. Amen.
When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Salome, went out and purchased burial spices to put on Jesus' body. Very early on Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they came to the tomb. On the way, they were discussing who would roll the stone away from the entrance to the tomb. But when they arrived, they looked up and saw that the stone, a very large one, had already been rolled aside. So they entered the tomb, and there on the right sat a young man clothed in a white robe. The women were startled, but the youth said, "Do not be so surprised. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who was crucified. He isn't here. He has been raised from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. Now go and give this message to his disciples, including Peter. Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you before he died." The women fled from the tomb, trembling and bewildered, saying nothing to anyone because they were too frightened to talk.
From among my many particular habits, is this. With few exceptions, I only watch the first episode and last episode of a television series. With the advent of streaming services, this is really easy to do. And so I've watched the premiere and the finale of some of the most streamed shows on the planet. Game of Thrones, Glee, The Good Place. And while it can be a little disorienting, because there are usually some characters that have hung around to that last episode, and more than a few callbacks to the premiere. So I'm not really lost. But if anyone can tell me where those two dragons came from at the end of A Game of Thrones, please tell me after the service. Really, it is a strange habit. And yet what I miss in the details from getting from that beginning to the end, I find replaced with the meaning in the emotional threads that have carried through. And if you're curious to know what this practice is like, well, consider celebrating Christmas and then Easter, beginning and end. Opening shot, a star. It guides shepherds and kings to a humble birth of an infant in a manger, baby Jesus, who holds the delight and the promise to bring joy to the world. Closing shot, empty tomb. Three women who knew and loved Jesus, the man who witnessed his innocent execution on a cross, are in utter bewilderment and awe to learn that he is still alive. Well, there are a lot of details missing here that go in between. Many stories of a ministry of Jesus connecting with those that the society had degraded and discarded. Women, those with mental illnesses, individuals suffering from chronic and terminal diseases. There are reports of marvelous miracles of walking on water through storms, of feeding thousands, of healing the sick and even the dead. There are parables and wisdom stories of good Samaritans, of being the salt of the earth, of sharing one's light with the world. There's even a prayer of loving kinship with the divine by calling God Abba, Father. You can tell I never really skipped over those intermediary details. And yet, if one did, if one just went from Christmas directly to Easter, you still might get a sense of the emotions and the feelings, the joy and the awe that his earliest followers held within their hearts. In a 2008 article in our UU World magazine entitled "The Present Paradise," the Dr. Rita Nakashima Brock and Reverend Rebecca Parker offer a startling revelation. The earliest Christian congregations focused their gaze not on the crucifixion, but on living in paradise here and now. Traveling to visit the many remaining churches, they discovered to their surprise and their delight, there was no suffering and dying on the cross. Instead, there were images of an earthly paradise, mosaics of open spaces, of hills and of valleys, alive with fruit and vegetable and beautiful flowers, filled with creatures of all kinds, clear water, clean air, sun and the moon shining. And they observed in these early churches a paradise, first and foremost, was in this world, permeated and blessed by the Spirit of God. And this led them to further realize that within their church communities, Christians of the first millennium sought to help life flourish in the face of imperial power, violence, and death. Early Christian communities based life-giving salvation in the here and now, not on the death and sacrifice or an afterlife. What would the world be like today if that tradition had continued? I can't even imagine. It gives new meaning to that question offered centuries ago in that early scripture, why do you seek the living among the dead? Because for early Christians, those Marys and Salomes, the Pauls and the disciples, Jesus was alive and in the world, joyfully renewing paradise and inviting them to do the same. Imagine that. Imagine that against the world we live in, where violence is justified, suffering glorified, and the innocent suffer, in no little part due to the change in Christianity about the 10th century that put a tortured, dying Jesus on a cross central to the faith, and set in motion systems that subverted the very life and ministry of the man they sought to emulate. In the face of the aggressive and venomous Christian revivals of the 1800s, the Universalist preacher, the Reverend Hosea Ballou, reflected, "Tradition makes the most horrible things acceptable to the mind, and even the most detestable things desirable by a certain feigned sanctity it attaches to them. But the charm once broken, the rational mind becomes transformed into another image, totally different, and entirely repugnant to the things that it once before venerated as divine." The transformation of Jesus back to filling the world with life rather than suffering on a cross. The Reverend Hosea, along with our other Universalist forebearers, taught that Jesus' crucifixion did not save. It was Jesus' embodiment of the spirit of creative love and justice that did. That's what mattered. It wasn't the torture of an innocent. It wasn't the glorification of violence. It was understanding that this man came and offered a new way to be human and to love, and offers us an invitation to do so today. Not that anything corrects 10,000 years of domination and cruelty in the name of Jesus, nor does it rectify the aggression and the supremacy that we endure today. It's happening right here in Tucson. It's happening in school boards and in bookstores. But it does begin to offer us a clue. How do we live in the face of this violence? It is, as Dr. Rita and Reverend Rebecca learned from those early Christians, that paradise is human life restored to its divinely infused dignity and capacity. It is a place of struggle that we live in with evil and injustice, and requires the development of wisdom and love, nonviolence, and the responsible use of power. Paradise, they say, is not a place free from suffering or conflict. It is a place in which the Spirit is present and love is possible. It's what Jesus taught and Jesus lived. In the face of systems of destruction and death and people demanding domination, we are invited to flow with a spirit of life, of justice and creation and peace, to revive the world like spring after winter. And call it what you will: Abba, Father, as Jesus did; Gaia, Mother, as many do; God or universe, the weaver of molecules, the spinner of stars; joy, love. Or give it no name at all and recognize it in every single flower that is blooming, those that were named, those that we still don't know the names of. But know that there is a ground of being which unshackles us to live. It unshackles us so that we might know this paradoxical paradise. Within life and death, beyond death and life, we learn to live free, to be inspired to boldly work, so that others may know liberation as well. May we live so boldly today and in all our days to come. Happy Easter. Our final hymn together is For the Beauty of the Earth, number 21. I've been singing this for days in my head, and so this morning I texted Chris and said, can we change that final hymn? And he said, sure, but I didn't realize that Julie had been practicing the other one. So thank you for learning this one very quickly. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join your voices together.
For the love which
On April 16th at 4 p.m., Baja 4 and the community is invited to a Jim Scott concert here at MVUU. It's called A Year to Save the Earth. As you leave the sanctuary today, there are 2 bowls on the table to the doors on your left. One bowl, the wooden bowl, is for the good works of MVUU, and the woven bowl is for our community partner, which is our Flowing Wells School. For all those who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this day be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all those who seek the eternal story of new spring and life beginning anew, may you breathe deeply of a season of promise and hope. For all who are experiencing despair and hopelessness this Easter, may you find in the darkness or depression a doorway to light and warmth that offers you freedom. For all of us, together we can do what no isolated person can do. Rolling the heavy stone aside reminds us we are far more powerful than we could ever be on our own. Our offering of strong hands to help our prayers made real. Let us begin again in love.